Now, what we consider a groundbreaking move that's sending ripples through the art world. The University of Iowa Stanley Museum of Art has become the first U.S. institution to return looted Benin bronzes directly to the Oba of Benin. Now, this historical repatriation, which took place on July 15th in Benin City, Nigeria, saw two precious artifacts, a brass plaque, and a wood and iron hand sculpture, finally making their way home after more than a century away.
Well, we should be happy, but let's just hold on that. Now, the return of these artifacts is not just a matter of cultural heritage, it's a powerful statement about rectifying historical wrongs. Now, these Benin bronze, among thousands stolen by British forces in the late 19th century, carry with them a weight of colonial violence and loss that, as Corey Goulart, curator of African art at the Stanley Museum, poignantly noted, can never be forgotten. The Oba of Benin, by the way, Owari II, emphasized both the spiritual and artistic significance of these pieces to the Benin Kingdom, highlighting the deep cultural wounds their absence has left.
Now, this repatriation raises crucial questions about the future of looted artifacts in museums worldwide. Now, while the Stanley Museum's decision is commendable, it also throws into sharp relief the vast number of Benin bronzes still held in collections across the globe. And what kills me is those that have it in personal collection as well. So, as we delve into this complex issue, we're honored to welcome guests joining us in the studio. First of all, we have joining us via Zoom, Victor Ehkimamenor. He's a renowned visual artist, writer, and photographer, award-winning, by the way, and world-renowned. Welcome to the program, Victor. We also have with us here in the studio Dr. Raphael James, Director General of the Center for Research, Information and Media Development and Curator at the CRIMMD Museum of Nigeria History.
Also, we have with us Dr. Adinke Bello Olarimoye. She is from the Lagos State University, and we want to welcome all our guests on the show this morning. Welcome, gentlemen. Welcome, lady. Good to have you here.
Good morning.
First of all, I want to ask, let's start ladies first, if you don't mind. Good doctor, how excited are you about these artifacts being returned? And let's not talk about the number because it's a meager 2. But are you excited?
Yes, I'm excited.
Okay.
And yet I'm not excited.
Please, why?
I'm excited because artifacts speak to history of a people, to their civilization, and returning them would suggest that the people will have confidence in their history and that the people, their ancestors had been able to contribute meaningfully to the material world, to aesthetics, to environment, to technology, because some of these artworks, sculptures are also a product of a kind of technology. So it's going to also imbue the history of the people in the minds of those people. However, I'm not also excited because bringing them back will suggest that we want to put them into use. Maybe economic use, because it's coming from a place that is being used for economic reasons. It may not have important values to them. Maybe it doesn't have any other values than aesthetics and the economy. They're able to make money out of it. Yes. But bringing them here, are we going to present them? Are we just going to put them somewhere, house them somewhere, without them being, brought to the public for shows, for operation, exhibitions and for education and for making money? Essentially, all of these materials, when they come, it's not the first time we'll be having repatriated artifacts. It started right from the period, I guess, Benin Raphael was the governor of Osun State. And we had some of them repatriated. Right. Well, have we seen them in the public? Have they been exhibited for the people to see? Are they making money, profit on them? That is the issue.
All right. Now, let me switch gears now and ask Mr. Ehkimamenor, who is joining us live video chat. Many thanks again for being so gracious and being with us from the top of the hour. You're an artist that is deeply connected to your Benin cultural heritage, and even your work reflects your cultural heritage as well. So I'd like to ask you about how you see this repatriation impacting the contemporary art scene in Nigeria, and what role can artists play in the ongoing efforts to reclaim looted artifacts?
Thank you for inviting me. It's a great it's been great to have some of these things started coming back or trickling in, even though they are quite a few numbers. The percentage of works that are being returned are still quite small. We can overemphasize the fact that their return is not just only for artistic reasons, for spiritual reasons as well, and also an encouragement and an ability for us to be able to see that our ancestors created things that were great, So the last was speaking only from the point of view of economic benefit, but we forget that these things have really high-end spiritual connotation to the places they were taken from. So we must always remember that, and you have to also look at history and figure out where were these things taken. You understand? They were taken from the inner sanctuary of the palace, So in that case, we must take that into cognizance when we're having these conversations. Again, for the contemporary artists in Nigeria or Africa, it's a big welcome development for us to be able to see that the things that were taken from us forcefully and in a bloodbath are getting returned.
And how do you see this impacting contemporary art as well, on artists as well? Do you see them also clamoring for more repatriation of our artifacts that have long been gone for centuries?
I mean, contemporary artists have been working over the years, you understand. If we actually look at it, I have been on this matter for a very long time. Irabo Emokpale of Blessed Memory has been on this matter since the 70s, which led to the use of the Idia mask as our insignia for Festac 77. So there is great impact it's going to have on us. And now we are going to begin to draw, because the Western museums have over the years not kind of created a link between what came before and what is now. You go to certain Western museums and all you see is some of these things that are looted. Then you are wondering, did Africa artists, did Nigerian artists, did the Benin artists stop creating works? So the question now is that it's shifting the focus, it's recentralizing what came before and what is still ongoing, because we never stopped creating. So some of the Western museums are beginning to now shift focus and also look at what is happening. So for instance, if somebody brings this artifact to Benin, there's the possibility that they will visit Igun Street. There's the possibility they will visit private studios. There's the possibility that they will visit private artists to see that things are still ongoing, that artists did not stop making works when colonialism ended.
I'm going to bring us back to the studio here, and I'm going to turn to you, Dr. James. Dr. James, Dr. Adeyinka mentioned something. I think also Victor also mentioned the same thing. These artifacts being returned to Nigeria, how exactly, as a museum curator yourself, how exactly are they going to be put into use? How are they going to be reintegrated? I'm going to warn you that we're going to go on a very short break, but I'd like you to begin your answer to that question first.
Okay, for me, from my own perspective as a curator, like you mentioned, integrating them depends on where they are going to. For example, now we have 2 artworks that have been repatriated, and they were taken straight to the Oba of Benin's palace, so I read. Now the point is this, the palace has the right to determine what they want to do with it. If they decide they want to put it in the National Museum Benin, for example, it's good for them. If they want to return it within the palace and probably create a museum within the palace. Of course, there's an existing museum in the palace, the Benin Palace. I've actually visited it. They might want to make it something a little bit bigger so that more people can come in. For me, I got excited when I saw the news, because looking at it this way now, about 160 international museums across the world have artworks from Benin Kingdom. And Germany, for example, have about 1,100 artworks within their premises, within their country. And imagine if we have all these things coming back to Nigeria. Again, I also understand, just like my colleague here said, we also have to be a little bit worried about how much we're going to preserve these things, because, like I said, Nigeria presently have about 54.
Dr. James, I warned you from before, we might need to take a very short break, but I want you to keep that thought because we're still going to visit it when we get back. It's very interesting and very important that we know. Let's take a short break, and when we come back, we're still going to be discussing about the return of artifacts to the Oba of Benin. We'll be back. Welcome back. We're still discussing Bring Back Our Arts. We have in the studio here Dr. Adeyinka, Dr. James, and of course Victor Ehkimamenor is on Zoom with us. We've been discussing how these two artifacts have been returned by the University of Iowa Museum to the Oba of Benin and how they can be put to use. Before we went on that short break, I was asking Dr. James exactly how these integrations would happen, and I wanted to add, are we sure of their preservation? Because I've been to museums and I've been to heritage sites, and the poor, deplorable situations or a state that I've seen some of these materials are very, very sad.
And that was one of the concerns that was raised when the conversation about bringing back our arts was artifact. Many of these curators and those who were in the Western museums were saying, oh, we don't have the resources or the capacity or facilities to be able to maintain this artifact or preserve them. What do you say to that?
Now, let the fact be told. Nigeria have about 54 museums and monuments across the country. I've visited about 35 of them. I've seen what is there, and realistically speaking, it's not as if we cannot improve. Of course, we can improve on it, but what is on ground presently, we might not be able to manage these artifacts and preserve them properly. That is just the reality. But again, we can actually improve on it. Most of the national museums across the country have most of their artifacts in the store. Pray you don't get to see what is kept in the store and how they are preserved in the stores. Honestly, you feel discouraged. But having said that, these are our properties. They belong to Nigeria. They have to come back to Nigeria, whichever way we want to do it. It is now left for us here to now find out how we can do the preservation. I want to give an example. Let me just cut off a little bit. Just yesterday, somebody drew my attention. Somebody made a post on Facebook, and another person commented mentioning my name. I should check it out. Now, this guy had gone to a mechanic workshop to repair his car, and he said over the years, he have always noticed the mechanic had this toolbox. But just yesterday, he had to look closer to the toolbox and discover that on top of the toolbox is written FEDECO. FEDECO box that was used in the 1978, 79 election. That is what he's using. In a sane society, that needs to be preserved, not as a mechanic box. And immediately I reached out to him. I said, please, I don't know how much it's going to cost, but I'm interested in keeping it in my museum. I run a private museum, and for crying out loud, I know what it takes me to put that place in order. And I believe if we set out to do this, we can actually, it's not as if we can't preserve these things. We have the capacity to preserve it. But you know, these formalities of government things, civil service kind of work, attentions are not paid to them. But it's high time we have to start working to preserve those things for the generations yet to come.
Right. Victor, let me come to you, because you've been very quickly. We need to take our headline news, the headline news on Breakfast Xtra. When we come back, we will wrap up this conversation with a nice bow. So stay with us. Before the break, we were talking about curating the art as well as preserving the artifact, whether or not Nigeria has the facility to preserve this artifact. And now we switch gears, all right, to talk more about this. And let me come to you, Victor, and first of all to say thank you. We understand that this has been handed over to the Oba of Benin. All the artifacts have been handed over to the Oba of Benin. But there are some conversations that are saying that, you know, some critics argue that it should not have been to him. It should have been with him. It might just be in the personal archive or artifacts of the royalty, instead of it being, you know, displayed for public, you know, being used to teach history and for business development. It might just go into personal collection, so to speak. But what is your thoughts on this? Do you think that they should be the rightful custodian, or do you think that this should have been given to proper curators who can be able to preserve and display this for exhibition and for historical tutelance?
Thank you, Judith. I think a lot of people don't have a background history of what these objects were and where they were taken from. And I think it's good that they are engaging with the community again for the way they are being re-engaged with the community right now. And a lot of people also forget that the Western museums argument up until recently were, oh, where are these things going back to? Who are the owners and all of that? It was it was kind of like shifting their argument up and down. And we're able to tell them that the place where these objects were taken from still exists. So for those that are able to like bring it back and return it to where they belong, they need to be reintroduced into the system where they were taken from. Like I said earlier, we are taking out the spiritual aspect of these bronze works that were taken, these artworks that were taken from the palace, and they were taken from the inner sanctuaries of the palace, and they served more purpose than you can ever imagine and that has ever been revealed to the general public. So if that is the way that is going to come into the country, that is totally fine by me. And let the Oba of Benin decide in his own rights what he wants to do with them, who he wants to give them to as for teaching. Some are for teaching and some are not for teaching. You have to realize that. So we must not negate that, and we must not sweep that under the carpet. There are a lot of people, there are a lot of critics that don't know what these things meant to the Benin people, to the Edo people, and what roles they play in our cosmology. So we must never sweep that under the carpet.
Yeah. Victor, in discussing repatriation and all of the lost meanings to all these artifacts, one must also put into context how this was taken and the lives that were lost as well. Do you see this conversation shifting from just bringing back our art to now repatriation about the lives that were lost during that time in looting and pillaging this artifacts and pressured belongings of the people of Benin?
I think it's a starting point. This is actually a starting point to even start from the physical objects, because the human loss that the Edo people experienced cannot be quantified. So at some point that conversation needs to be had. And one of the biggest conversations we are not having right now are who owns the rights to the digital images that were taken of these works, because I'm working on a book right now, and for me to use any of these old works, I have to take rights from some of these museums that own them, and I'm from Nigeria, from Edo State, and so there are multiple things that need to be like unbundled in this matter of restitution and repatriation of the works. So at some point, somebody has to spearhead that and say, look, there were lives lost, and how do we account for those? And it's the British that we have to definitely point that finger to see how we can do that. The British Museum is still very much holding on to their works, and we have not even started having that conversation. They have not started shifting their ground on retaining these works and retain and explain. So we need to also we have a long way to go. We have a lot of fights to do for these works to be returned. So and we also have things to do at home to make sure that these works come to the rightful owners and come to the rightful places.
Okay, then, Victor. Let me bring it back to you, Dr. Adeyinka. Now, it's not the first time we've had it's not the first time that we've had repatriated artwork back to Nigeria. A few years ago, if I'm not mistaken, the Goethe Institute actually talked about the return of a couple of artifacts to Osun State. But we don't get to hear as much about these other artifacts. We only get to hear mostly about the Benin artifacts. I'm wondering why there's such a disparity.
Well, the Benin are making huge noise about the return of their artifacts than the Yorubas are doing. I guess the Yoruba will also have to learn from the Edo people to understand the importance of their artworks, their artifacts, because these are historical facts about the people. I guess Edo became emotional about their own artifacts, considering the manner they were taken out of Edo, the Benin City and the palace specifically. Maybe the Yoruba people, some of them had rooted them themselves. I don't know the narrative context, the history, the context, but obviously the contexts are different. However, as a culture expert, I guess all material culture like that should be made available to the people. I understand the perspective of the doctor who just spoke now, Victor. From Edo, you can see that it will be more emotional. Me, I'm just thinking of how these materials will help drive the economy of Edo people and Nigeria as a whole. And I know that spirituality is also involved in some part of these artifacts. it's also something that is amusing me, because this is a Nigeria that, as at 1977, the First Start period, people, Christians and Muslims, were even kicking against that particular festival, seeing it as a gathering of Orisha worshipping, paganism, and the rest, and is increasingly becoming even an issue in the current Nigerian society, where Christians see all these materials as being fetish, as being trying to bring back our Orisha to the space, to the social space. So it's becoming even more interesting that when we are talking of material culture, people cannot separate them from your actual culture, your non-material culture, such as religion. I was in Saudi Arabia for the last Hajj, and I saw the Medina people building a museum. What are they going to put in the museum, if not the Saudi Arabian and Medina history in materials, isn't it? But we don't understand this the
aspect of tourism.
Yes, it's an aspect of tourism. It will also drive tourism. Tourism gives almost 70%
the commerce, yes, exactly, and that's the commerce.
To other countries.
I want to talk about the commerce now. Victor highlighted the fact that pictures have been taken of these artifacts, and that the rights to these pictures belong to the foreign museums. But these are Nigerian artifacts. Dr. James,
you're a curator.
You're a curator. So how does this annoy you? Is this something that bothers you?
Well, sincerely speaking, what I do in my museum is, when I see some of these photographs that are actually taken from artwork that belongs to Nigeria and credit are given to foreign museums, when I put them in my museum, I give credit to where they come from in Nigeria. That is what I do. And I keep saying, come and hold me responsible. You can't come to my house and take something from my house, take it to your place, and not tell me that it belongs to you. It's not yours. It's mine. You took it from my place. So, and I think, yes, that is something we have to actually rectify. I've seen pictures, people take some photographs that were even taken to the First Act 77, and somebody will give credit to another museum outside the country. How did you do it? Didn't you come to Nigeria to take it? So these things happen here, that belongs to us. I don't think they have the right over this, right over those photographs that have been taken, because there's a source where they are taken from.
I mean, we're out of time, right? And we've talked about repatriation, we've talked about preserving, we've talked about display, we've talked about the commerce, all sides of it. But there is still so much out there in numbers that we don't know about, from the Nok culture, from the Igbo-Ala culture, from the Igbo,
Can I chip in something?
So how can we get it back?
Let me chip in something. I think about 4 years ago, somebody reached out to me on social media and sent a lot of photographs of Nigerian artworks that are over 200 years old. They are in Italy. And he asked, will you want to buy them? I said, yes, I'm interested in buying them. But I have a challenge. Even if I pay you money, I transfer money to you in Italy, how do you bring it down to Nigeria? The customs will seize it at the airport.
Yes.
And once they seize it, the Nigerian government is going to take it away from me. So how do I defend that these are not stolen items? Because he was telling me that his great-grandfather was a seller. He came to Nigeria in 18-something and he bought those things. I asked, is there a proof that they were bought? Is there evidence, any documented evidence? He said, how do you expect me to keep it? He's a white guy. He's an Italian. He said, how do you expect me to keep it? I said, well, that is the only condition that's going to make me to show interest in buying them. Because I don't want to buy something that at the time I ship it into the country, they will not seize it back from me. So there's a whole lot of work that needs to be done. There's a whole lot of preservation work that needs to be done. This is our history, and if we don't keep our history, nobody's going to keep it for us. And that's actually the challenge we're having. The foreigners come, take our history, write our history for us, and send it back to us, and we just believe in it. And things keep going wrong.
Obviously, so much that needs to be done. There's preservation, restoration, repatriation,
restitution,
all of that.
Commerce as well. Victor, many thanks for coming on. We appreciate you for doing this with us. And lastly, many more of the Benin heads that we have there. You mentioned British Museum. Do you think that the Oba of Benin will now maybe take a more, should I say, attention or more, I'm looking for intentional steps, intentionality in repatriating those, or start the conversation or the talks to bring back more of this artifact, especially the museums in the UK?
I would say that the palace has never stopped asking, because you have to kind of look at Oba Kenzwa in 1932 when he asked the palace has never stopped asking. I mean, there will be more concerted effort now from the palace, from the individuals, from Edo people to return these works. And the fact that museums are getting built in Benin right now, the Royal Museum is going to get built, Museum of West African Art is getting built. Even the Nigerian National Museum there is getting a facelift so that some of these things can be returned, you know. So again, there is more concerted effort now. There is more light that is being shared on these objects that are out there to be returned. Once again, the palace has never stopped asking. We have to look at history. Edward Akenzwa, who was a major journalist and a writer in the 60s and 70s, has written so much about this in the Nigerian magazine, you know. So again, some of the critics that we have in Nigeria have to actually go back to history and how much we have asked for these things. We have never not asked for the works that belong to the Edo people, that belong to the Benin people and all of that, you know. So we need to get back to that mode, and I'm glad that we are beginning to get result from it right now. We just have to prepare for them, and we're already preparing for these things to be returned.
Victor, we want to say thank you. Thank you so much for being so kind and being patient and gracious with us and being with us from the beginning of the program. Many thanks again. Many thanks.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.